Hey everyone, welcome back to On the Road of Recovery. We have Reed from Belpre here with us today at our Marietta event. How are you doing today, Reed?
I'm great.
Good. Well, thanks for coming out and sharing your story with us. So I'll just ask you the basic questions at first. Can you describe your childhood for me, what it was like? Did you grow up with both of your parents, school life, that kind of thing?
Sure. So I was born here in Marietta, but I grew up in Parkersburg, West Virginia. My dad, he's from St. Mary's, just up the river, and my mom's from North Carolina. So for the first 10, 11 years of my life, I grew up with both of them. I feel like tumultuous might be a good word to describe, turbulent. There was a lot of violence in the home. Mom, she used drugs, she drank. Dad used drugs and drank. They fought a lot. At age 11, I get the news from my mom. She says, go tell your neighbors bye. I said, why? She says, we're leaving. I said, well, what about my friends at school, my teachers and stuff? And I didn't get to tell them bye. We ended up going to North Carolina. My mom gave my dad the ultimatum that you go to North Carolina, get us a house, get a job, or I'm leaving you. And there was some politics behind that. But I feel like my mom wanted us to move down there because she wanted more access to drugs. She was kind of burnt out on the relationship, and it ended up being true. I don't remember a lot of family life in that trailer together. It seemed like everybody was gone a bunch. And next thing you know, my mom leaves my dad for a cocaine dealer down there, and dad's gone, drinking that situation away. And then me and my brother are stuck there at the trailer by ourselves to fend for ourselves. So I had a brother who was a full sibling, same mom, same dad. And then I had a sister who grew up with it. She's older than me. Different dad, same mom. And my sister came to the house, found out that we didn't have any food, and she kind of rescued me and my brother. So I end up back in West Virginia because my dad comes back to West Virginia, and I move up here with him, and my mom and my brother stayed down here, or stayed out in North Carolina. And it made the family dynamic really hard. But normal for me was my dad bought my cigarettes for me. I had started smoking weed when I was in North Carolina. I mean, I was a bona fide pothead freshman, sophomore year. I feel like it was pretty bad. I was pretty reliant on it. If I didn't have it, that was the goal after school, was to find out how I was going to get high. And yeah, it progressively got worse. I feel like just with experimentation of promethazine, cough syrup, pills, Valium, Xanax, Vicodin, all that was accessible. My junior year classes got a lot harder. I took a lot of AP courses. I was looking forward to going to a good school. And the course load would have been fine if the situation wasn't the way it was. But it was, and I was a stoner, and I'm sitting in Miss Taylor's class doing that trig test, and I'm just staring at it. I don't know what any of this means. I can't do this. Why can't I think straight? I'm thinking about I'm going to go home, and I love my dad to death, but he's just gotten in the habit of, like, we're friends, me smoking cigarettes is cool, me and smoking weed is cool, me drinking on the weekends is cool. So I ended up moving in with my aunt my junior year, which is different, right? Because the conditions where you're not getting high anymore, you're not drinking on the weekends, you're not smoking over here, enjoy your last cigarette over there, and you're gonna do what you're supposed to. She loved me. She was willing to help take care of me. At that point, I was pretty okay taking care of myself for a lot of things. So here I am at my aunt's, and I quit the smoking. I threw the cigarettes down for cold turkey. I quit smoking weed for a little bit, quit the drinking, but all that was hard. And it wasn't before long I had a high school sweetheart who I ended up getting pregnant back then. And that came up, and that made the relationship between me and my aunt kind of hard because she wasn't ready to deal with that.
Right.
And then my girlfriend's parents wanted her to abort it. And my aunt's a pretty Christian person. She wasn't for that. So here she is stressed out with that. Go through with that. She has the abortion. Ends up one night, I remember my ex was at the house sick, and I think I just got home from work, but I wanted to take her some medicine or something to go check on her. And it was like 8:30 on a Sunday, if I recall correctly. And she says, you're not going, you got school in the morning, you just got home, like it's getting dark out. And I said, come on, Aunt Bonnie. Because I feel, I'm grown at this point.
Right.
Even though I can't pay, my own bills and stuff, she's providing a house for me, I'm grown.
Right.
I'm Superman. I was like, I'm gonna get in my car, pay for the gas for her, I'm going to take care of my girl. And she's like, no, you're not. And something had clicked with her that night. I mean, my aunt's nobody to mess with. And I know she loved me, but I was surprised to see that in her, thinking that I could have my own way. I was used to that, having my own way. And she had made up her mind. Well, I had too, because I'm just as stubborn. I said, I'm going. And I went. And I knew after I went, I was like, well, you better figure something out. So I stayed at my girlfriend's for a couple of days because her moms knew that I was like the type to make irresponsible decisions, impulsive decisions. That's part of the mental health aspect we'll get to later. And when I come back to my aunt's house, it was on the weekend, my cousin shows up and she says, because nobody was home, she says, get your stuff. You're not welcome here anymore. She's like, I hope you pack up. You need to get all your stuff out of here. You're not living here anymore. I said, it's like that. All right, fine. So now I'm mad, stuffing all my clothes in trash bags, carrying them out the door, shoving them in the back of my 2000 Mercury Cougar. And here I am. I'm grown, right? I still got to go to school. So, hey, Miss Hot, this happened. My guidance counselor. I don't want to drop out of school. The goal with going to my aunt's was to make sure I do okay. I still want to do okay. What can we do? Because I'm homeless right now. And my aunt, because I was underage, got a small amount of money from the state to help take care of me. And she saved it all. God bless her heart. She didn't need the money. She had saved it all. So she offers that money. I didn't know it was her at the time. I found out much later.
Wow.
Yeah, she offered that all to Miss Hot to get me a room at the boarding house there in St. Mary's. So I had my own room at the boarding house for like a month or two. So the day I graduated, I shut the key behind the door and locked it. So now I'm homeless again. So my dad had remarried at this point, and he lives in St. Mary's, and I go up there and kind of impose and say, hey, can I stay here until I go to college in the fall? And I stayed there for a couple of weeks, but me and my dad, have it out, screaming, cussing at each other. F you, I hate you, never want to see you again. So I'm out the front door at the beginning of summer, and I decide that I want to walk to Camp Horseshoe. It's a YMCA Camp Horseshoe in Tucker County, West Virginia. It's a leadership camp that I'd gone to a couple summers when I was in high school. And there's a man by the name of David King there. He was the director of the organization, who I knew if I get to Camp Horseshoe, I could work there. They'll help me. So I got to spend that summer there. Went to college that fall. David helped me with that. Went to West Virginia Wesleyan. I was going to play tennis there. Was on the team. Major in biology. I was a community service scholar, so I had all this stuff going for me. And once I get there, I'm just super depressed. David tried to be supportive, and he was, but I'm in Buchanan, West Virginia, away from everybody. I didn't have my girl. I didn't have my friends. I wasn't really getting high at that point. I didn't have any outlet to get high. So I just felt really alone. I stopped going to class. I was sleeping all the time in my dorm. I started getting calls from these people I don't know, and they're friends of David King's, who I'll refer to as my grandpa now. All these important people I didn't know encouraged me, like, hey, you're doing great. We're glad to, keep it up. And I'm thinking, I don't know you. Leave me alone.
Right.
Because I was just devastated. And I don't know why. So that was the beginning of my mental health really falling apart.
Okay.
So it was my first, I think, major depressive episode. And after I dropped out of college, I called my buddy. I said, hey, man, come and get me. I'm done with this. So kind of long story short on that one, I end up homeless on the streets of Raleigh with no shoes, like rapping with some guys I met on this record label, New Future Records and Cash Fortune, and really in a way lose my mind, really in a way experience a different side of life in that mania, because I really thought that I was going to be some kind of cool rapper, and I was really glad to be a part of something like that, but I was also super homeless at that time. Ended up getting a bus ticket back from North Carolina after being down there a few weeks in Raleigh, sleeping, I can honestly say I've eaten out of trash cans. I remember there was this guy that was in like this tunnel that connects streets in downtown Raleigh, and he told me that if you're hungry, wait till about 3 o'clock and go around behind these restaurants. That's when they all take out their food. And he's like, come on, I'll show you. And he takes me out there, and there were to-go boxes with like not even eating food in it, French fries, burgers, and stuff. So that's what I ate. It's not as gross as you would think eating out of the trash, but it definitely was a thing, and there's a strategy to it there.
Right.
And the guy taught me that. I always respect him for that. And I was mentally unwell. It was hard to deal with. So I was pretty wound up with the mania. And I end up moving into a cabin that my dad had access to out in the middle of nowhere with no running water. And I stay out there for a minute with no transportation, no phone, running with guys out there. And at this point, as the mental health kind of really put me at a disadvantage, realized use was only ever weed, some pills here and there, and alcohol. Mm-hmm. That's what my use stayed at until I was about 21. Which at that point I would have experienced both hospitalizations that I've gone through. The first hospitalization happened after I was at the cabin. I make my way into town in St. Mary's, burdening some friends, imposing on them, stop sleeping, partying all the time, to where I stopped sleeping completely. I'm booking shows or trying to book shows. I never successfully booked any of them, but this girl from Cleveland, she's from Brecksville that I know, her dad was a booking agent, and he had this act, Squidly Cole, who was Bob Marley's drummer back in the day. Dude was coming from Florida up to New York and West Virginia's in between. So he says, hey, if you can get him some shows, great. So I'm calling everybody. Yeah. We got Bob Marley's drummer. We got to get this guy some shows. It's Squidly Cole, the Flying Squid. Like, let's get him some shows. And in that process, just my mind fell apart to where I'm walking around with like 2 ties on and just dressed all kinds of crazy with my Bible box and all kinds of stuff meticulously folded in there, and tearing off Bible pages and putting them in people's mailboxes. Wow. Eventually, so bad, I go down to the police station in St. Mary's and I knock on the door. And I was like, guys, you got to check this out. Have you seen these smartphones where you can put the SIM cards in and out, and they can about the Android software and privacy rights and all kinds of crazy stuff? And they're just looking at me dumbfounded. Actually, before we had that conversation, I came down to the cop's door. I knocked and I said, do you believe in God? To the cop that answered the door. He's like, excuse me? And I asked him if another cop was there. He's like, no, not right now. He'll be in later. So I kind of walked off, knowing that the look in that guy's eyes knew that something was wrong with me. But here I am, super manic. Life's great. So I come back, and that the cop I was looking for was there. But there were several of them there, and they're thinking, what is going on with this guy? So they sit me down.
Right.
And luckily, a sheriff that I'm friends with now, he's a runner. We run together, thankfully. It's cool how that relationship's blossomed. He takes me to Subway because he can tell I'm hungry. I haven't slept in a long time. I'm going 120 miles an hour, and he takes me to go get some food. And while that's all going on, everybody realizes I need some help. So he ends up transporting me to Parkersburg to Westbrook. And I get committed through that process because I'm trying to argue with the staff that I can levitate and I believe in all that. They commit me. I didn't quite know what that meant because I felt like I was persuaded into going to the hospital. It's okay, we'll do this and that. And I get there and they put me in the elevator and I go in, I change my clothes, and the tech walks me in. Now I'm in this unit. I'm like, all right, cool, but the door shuts behind me. I was like, this is kind of high security, it feels like. We're on the top floor of the hospital. Like, we had like a locking chamber where the lockers are, and all my stuff went in there and they inventoried it. And like, so when will I be able to leave? The answer comes back, like, we're not sure, but you're here for at least 14 days, up to 28. Traumatized. And I'm a big advocate for that now because I realize how traumatizing, because it's incarceration, institutionalization in any form of incarceration. It's very traumatizing. It's the worst form of punishment. I don't wish that on anybody. And then I swell up again because I'm on lithium and all these antipsychotics and I can't function and all I want to do is sleep and life's miserable. So I end up staying at David's for a while, and I get reconnected with an old friend from high school. His name's Randy Faust. He's my old doubles partner from tennis. And it was good to hear from him because I didn't have any social interaction at that time at all. And he's like, what are you doing? I said, you just don't understand. And he wanted to claim that there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have a mental illness, because some people just don't understand. That's what we're doing here, right? Is to reduce the stigma so people understand. I was not in control at those times. There was nothing I did that created that. That's just who I am. Exactly. So we have to deal with it. He says, why don't you come down to Nashville? Because he left town after school. He said, come down to Nashville and visit me. He said, matter of fact, just come down and stay. I was like, well, let's start with a visit. So I go down and visit. We have a great time. Get hammered every night. It's my liking, not his. But we're celebrating. And he says, if you don't want to go home, you don't have to. I said, I think I might like to stay. So I stay in Nashville. And I keep up with my mental health to a degree. I get back into the doctor and I see a therapist. But I'm drinking real heavy. And I get a job at Little Caesars. That's the first time I'd worked in years, kind of, because when I'm on medicine, I wasn't able to work. And when I was working at Little Caesars there in Nashville, I met who became my coke dealer. Because, my stepdad's a coke dealer. I know what to look for. So right. Dude came in for some pizza. I was like, where's the white girl at, man? So there I am off the wagon. I'm using coke all the time. Basically, every amount that I can afford. I'm buying a half gallon of bourbon, getting coke, and going home and just getting high because that's my comfort. That's my social support. That's my friend. Drugs are my friend. So I ended up coming back to West Virginia because I had this idea that I was going to go back to college because I've always wanted to graduate from college. So I'm going to come back to West Virginia, get a good labor job, work that for a year, save up some money to where I can support myself through college. So I came back with that goal in mind and stay with my dad out at his actual cabin this time because that's where he's living because the relationship didn't work out with his ex-wife.
Oh.
Yeah. My brother comes into this equation. When I was in Nashville, I heard from my brother, family in North Carolina, they're like, your brother's in the hospital. For what? He's got sepsis. He might die.
Oh.
Thinking, Jesus. They had to cut in his arm, cut out all this sepsis. I talked to my brother. I said, Zach, what's going on? Are you okay? He's like, yeah, I just left the hospital. Left the hospital? What do you mean? He didn't pick up his antibiotics or anything. He left the hospital to go get high again after he just had surgery on his arm from an infection. So I was really ate up about that. I'm thinking, my brother's in really bad shape. And spend some time coming to acceptance of that I can't control that he's just dealing with that.
Yeah.
When I get back to West Virginia, find out, because that was in North Carolina, he ends up being back in West Virginia. And he's homeless in Parkersburg this time, and you can tell he's strung out. And I was under the impression I was coming back to live with just my dad in this camper outside of his cabin to do my own thing, to work, stay straight, and go back to school. At that point, I was just abusing my Klonopin and drinking because there's no cocaine in West Virginia, to my knowledge, that I was able to access at that time anyways. Right. So my dad's ate up because my brother starts texting him. It's like, oh, I need a place to stay. I'm homeless. I'm doing real bad. And it's really getting to my dad. And I'm thinking, Dad, I can't tell you to not let your son come back here. But I don't want to be around him if he's using.
Right.
So ends up he comes back, and it's a big party. And my brother was dope sick when he shows up. He can't get off the couch. I remember we were carrying wood one day, and he just lays on the ground halfway through carrying the wheelbarrow. It's just like, just give me a minute. I'm thinking, my brother was always the tough one, was always the strong one, could always whoop me, and now he is laying on the ground. It's real sad. Anyways, at that camper at my dad's, with my brother around, I end up, this girl comes out and ends up having meth on it. And I freaked out at first. I'm like, why would you bring that around me? And then ends up, oh, you can snort it? I put it up my nose, and then down the rabbit hole we go on meth. So what it was is I wanted to stop going to work, because when you do meth, you don't want to work anymore. But I played it off as, okay, I'm going to go to part-time and I'm going to go back to college, because that was the goal. And in my mind, I am going to go to college. I got enrolled into WVU Tech. When it came time for orientation, I was so strung out on meth that I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't have any drugs that morning. I needed them to get up. I didn't, so I didn't make it to orientation. Plus, I've already quit this job too. They fired me from not showing up. So here I am, jobless, no school, meth addiction. And my brother had gone back to North Carolina. I bought him a bus ticket because he likes heroin, right? And there for a long time, I was selling meth that I was buying so I could get high, and get high with dad, and get high with brother. And felt like an awful person for it, but that's just the lifestyle we lived together. Well, Zach got tired of being out of the cabin by himself, not having his own means, and says he wants to go back to North Carolina. I'm like, well, I'll get you there. And I take him to the bus station in Parkersburg so we can go back to North Carolina and allegedly try and save my mom in that situation. But really, I knew that he wanted to be able to do heroin. And he goes back to North Carolina, and that's what he did. So not long after I didn't make it to orientation for WVU Tech, it would have been August 27th, tomorrow, in 2017, I come up the steps of my dad's cabin, and there was just this air of weirdness. Because I say up the stairs, I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And he doesn't respond, but he's moving around, and his dad's just standing there. He says, it's just not a good day. And I knew at that time when he said that what it was, because I'd known for a long time I was going to lose my brother to heroin. When I had that conversation in Nashville with him, no disregard for his life, he left the hospital so he could choose drugs, and knew that my brother was very troubled throughout our entire life. He didn't deal with our childhood, I think, as well as I did. Not that you can deal with that well, but he really took it to heart. Yeah. His relationship with my mom really messed with him. So August 27, 2017, lost my brother, and I'm strung out of meth at that time. We ended up having 2 funerals for him, one in North Carolina, which is where his body was. We had to go down there and pick it up and ride back. What was his ashes? He was cremated, and bring his ashes back to West Virginia so we can have a service for Dad's family and his friends up here. So if I was getting high on meth at that point, I continued to get high on meth a lot more after that, because grief is something that can really set in when you're in addiction, and meth just really helps you perpetuate that feeling deeper and deeper and lets you live in it and dwell on it, and it manifests itself and you are the grief, and it's just this big emotion of misery that you float around being. At least for me it was. I end up meeting my ex not long after that. She had lost her husband around the same time in a lumbering accident. So one of my best friends worked at the gas station with her, and she saw my brother's little funeral pamphlet in there. And there was some kind of saying in it that really resonated with her because she just lost her husband. So we ended up connecting, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole. And she had moved into this apartment, and she worked part-time at the gas station. Her husband was the provider. He's not around. I'm kind of doing my thing with peddling drugs a little bit. I'm miserable. I want to help her. So I move in and try and help her. I try and save her. I try and be the man for her. That's when I really started trafficking drugs heavy. I went out, sought a plug, found the best deal I could on weight of meth, and started flipping it to provide for me and her, because she was an addict too. And when I got with her, she was shooting her sub butex. And I wasn't for that. I'm like, I just lost my brother to heroin. You're not going to shoot drugs around me. Either we can get past it together, or you can kind of do that on your own. So she did her best to put the needle down, and I think she did for the majority. There was some hiccups and stuff, but she just went to putting the subs up her nose. So we go to Pittsburgh every month, and I buy her script of subs, and I'm putting meth up my nose all the time and drinking, and I start buying guns, and I'm just kind of living wild for a little bit, because it takes a lot of meth transactions to support two individuals with drug habits, vehicles, and a car. That's all I was doing. I wasn't working. So we end up getting raided with the raid machines and the SWAT team, the drug task force. They come in and kick in the door and drag me to jail.
Wow.
Yeah. So in a way, it was a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that's where I made the decision to get sober.
So how long have you been sober now?
3 years as of the 17th. August 17th, 2017 is when I was arrested. No, 2018. Yeah, August 17th, 2018.
So 3 years. And how does it feel now? Like now that you you got sober, did you work a program to get sober?
Did I work a program? So I read all the AA literature I had access to while incarcerated. And I went to basically as many 12-step meetings as I could for a long time. Towards the end of my sentence, I stopped going to the 12-step meetings because I realized I had made my choice at that point. And the support was cool, but there are things in prison, such as working out and playing cards, I enjoyed more than going to the meetings. So I started to choose those.
Okay. So when did you get out of prison?
April 27th, 2020. So a little over a year ago.
Okay. So what do you do now to maintain your sobriety? Make sure that not only, are you taking care of your mental health, but also maintaining your sobriety?
Yes. So mental health comes before the addiction, because when my mental health is good, I got a baseline on how I can stay away from the drugs. As soon as I use drugs, the mental health falls apart, and it takes a whole rehabilitation process. So we got to look at a few different things: mind, spirit, and body. How do we supply our mind? So we can read, we can have intellectual conversations with people. How do we reinforce our physical health? I like to run, I like to play tennis, I like to exercise, I like to walk, I like to enjoy nature. So doing those things helps me. And then spiritually, so I find that through social activities, the marching bands going on out there. Music is good. So I enjoy music, I serve at church, I serve a lot of different places as far as volunteering. So staying busy socially kind of helps me with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Short story. Healthy Kids Running Series is one of the organizations I work for. It's a 5-week running series. We teach 2 to 12-year-old kids how to live a healthy, active lifestyle. It was week 5. We had a successful community turnout. There was 140 kids, families. It was a great event. And afterwards, I go home and it all fades away, but I'm just in awe of all that. I'm thinking the community just trusted me to provide this program to their kids, and we did it, and it was a success. And I'm just so thankful to be here and sober right now. I walk from my apartment to a park because I'm alone, and that's okay. I can celebrate alone. You've got to be able to. I walk to the park, and I'm swinging there at the park because I like to swing, and I'm looking around, and there's this guy with his nieces, and they're running across the park, and there's a guy over here in his boots, and his girlfriend's got scrubs on, and they're playing basketball together, and I'm just swinging, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm realizing what I had earned from the choices I made, and it was all of just being healthy and being well, and that's been my favorite thing so far.
That's so cool. So everyone's gonna want to know about your relationships, as in like your parents. How is your relationships now with your dad, your mom, your stepdad?
I see my mom one time. I went down for Thanksgiving. I made sure I booked another activity other than just seeing her in case that went south. So I went down there, stayed at the beach, and ran a 5K, and then afterwards I had Thanksgiving with her and my sister. They behaved much better than the last time I saw them and when my brother was around, so that's cool. I really have to limit my interaction because they still use.
Understandable.
So I don't talk to them very much because it's unhealthy for me.
Right.
Dad, on the other hand, I think he still gets high and drinks and stuff, but he works all the time. But him and I have never gotten along great, so we have to limit how much we talk to each other. We love each other and he's supportive, but it's kind of a tightrope, and I have learned since being home, if it becomes unhealthy, I have to shut it off. Let it drop for a month or two, let it off for 3 or 4 months. The relationships, because prison gave me the opportunity to get away from all those relationships. That's why I was able to be sober. If I was still around my ex and my mom and my sister and my dad, I'd be torn up.
Right.
So I have to be very careful.
So what do you see for your future now?
I see doing everything within my capabilities of helping individuals that came from similar situations as me that are at risk for drug addiction and mental health, and keeping them from going from what I had to. You know, if when I was 12 there was some kind of mentor to come around and keep me away from that. If when I was 17 there was somebody that was 28 and lived it to come and talk to me, to come and hang out with me, to kind of teach me what to look out for. I think it's important that the kids in our community here in the Middle Ohio Valley and nationwide have access to that. And I'm working on that through the organization I work with. It's to get more connections, and it's called the How to Save a Life program. So we focus on youth development, community health and wellness, and mental health to try and prevent those things, early intervene.
Awesome.
So
that's very cool that you're doing that and giving back like that. It really is. So other than that, give me an example of one thing you are proud of since getting sober.
We mean a part about myself or something I've earned or achieved?
Either.
I'll give you 2 examples if that's okay. About me is just my health, mental, physical, spiritual. I'm the healthiest I've ever been, and it feels good. And then achievement wise, just a couple of days ago, the announcement came out that I am the 2021 recipient of Philanthropy West Virginia's Spirit of Philanthropy Award for an individual. And I got that call on my brother's birthday this year. So October 29th, I'll go to Glade Springs at the Philanthropy West Virginia conference and be honored to receive that award from the community service I've done in this past year. So having my health allowed me to serve others right in the community and make an impact, and being recognized for that. It's incredible, right?
That's awesome.
So
that's so cool. So what exactly do you do for your mental health now?
Take my medicine in the morning.
Okay.
Running is good for my mental health. I've been injured, so it's been really difficult. I'm not going to act like life's perfect now. I struggle. I struggle often. But when I take care of physically, the exercise really helps. Music helps me mentally. Talking with healthy people, my advisors, my good friends, can supplement like talk therapy, because I've learned with the therapist, those are helpful for my mental health, but it's usually only an hour a week. So if you can find people with similar, that can give you the similar experience to a therapist, try and reach out to those. That's important for me. So medicine, exercise, trying to eat fairly well. That helps. I've noticed that helps a lot, actually.
Yeah.
If you don't eat like trash all the time.
It really does, for sure.
And then nature. So being in nature is good stress relief.
Yeah, I like those coping mechanisms. I use them too. So what have you learned from your addiction?
I've learned you can't judge a book by its cover. It's aggravating in a way. So I have to be upfront with people that I've been to prison. they would never guess it. We do this activity in peer training where you line up together, and if you had this disadvantaged circumstance, like you were on food stamps or grew up poor, you take a step back, or you went to college or had money, you take a step forward. And I end up at the back of that. And that's okay. But when people look at me or they talk to me, they assume that I had privilege. And there is privilege to being a white male, don't get me wrong, but not always the way you would think about it. So I've learned that it doesn't just apply to me, it applies to everybody. You can never assume who struggle with addiction. You can never assume how people have been touched by addiction. You can never assume what kind of trauma people have experienced if they ever had the opportunity to share with anybody. So we really have to be careful and pay attention to people and try and support and take care of them. I've learned that that's a really important aspect, because the reason we're dealing with a lot of these issues is because people don't have people around that care.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I agree. And I think being open-minded to things also. Do you have any words of hope that you would like to share with someone trying to get sober?
It's okay that you're getting high right now. Like, I don't judge you. I don't think that makes you a bad person. I had to tell somebody the other day, choosing to use drugs does not make you a bad person. I'll say it again. Choosing to use drugs does not make you a bad person. It may be bad for you. It may not be the best choice. But there's always the opportunity to stop making the choice. And now more than ever, there are resources available. There are places to go for help. There are people that want to help you. So if you're having a hard time with addiction, know that asking for help is the first step. Hopefully nobody's going to shame you. Hopefully nobody's going to traumatize you. Likely they won't. And I think if you take that first step, you'll thank yourself later. So if I can do it, anybody can do it, right? Even though I don't look like a drug trafficker or meth junkie. I think it's important for people to see past recovery. Like, yeah, there are the methods to being healthy, and we need to identify those and strengthen those. But once we're there, you ask me, what's my hope for the future? And it doesn't have to be associated with recovery. You can go back to school and be a scientist if you want to. You can go be a doctor. You can be a sports coach. I just want to encourage people that if they're early in sobriety or working through that recovery is not the end game. You don't have to get sober and become a peer. You don't have to get sober and become a sponsor. The world is just as open to you as it is everybody else. So.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Reed. Your story is incredible. It really is. It's unique and inspiring, and it's going to help so many people. So we appreciate you coming out here so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I'm a volunteer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's West Virginia Hike for Hope. I've been raising money for that cause for a while now, and to raise money, I pledged to run miles per dollars donated. And after I met my goal, I extended an offer to run some of those miles in the shark costume. And so I have 190 miles in the shark costume to run in 2021. They don't necessarily have to be in town. I think what I'd like to do is run a small number of those miles in each state across the country to kind of get the message of raising money for suicide prevention in the shark costume nationwide. Morning. Fishing for sharks out there? Nice, good luck. I lost my best friend, Charles Valley Smith, to a heroin overdose around 5 years ago. And I also lost my brother 2 years ago to a heroin overdose. You flip your head up, and you gotta make sure before you take off, the fins are out. Now, usually I'd have my earbuds in. It's hard for me, right? Because I wish that they would be able to see me here. This has been my opportunity to kind of share my story of loss of my brother, my best friend, and then my overcoming addiction, and the reason that I now run in a shark costume.